Hello, this is Professor Shapiro, known on the internet as Harry Hawk, and we are back working with Google Analytics and spreadsheets. Now, this is the second video in the spreadsheet series, and in a chain, you should have watched the introduction to Google Analytics video, and then watch the prior video working with the spreadsheet. And now this is the second spreadsheet video, and we're going to build on everything that we talked about, and some of the things that I explained really slowly in the second video and in the first video, I'm going to go through a little bit faster. So what you should know then, if I do something that seems a little confusing to you, send me a text message. You can rewind the video and watch it again. And you can also go back into the earlier videos. Now, all the earlier videos have closed captioning, but there is also a transcript available. So you could look in the transcript, you could search through it using your word processor or some other tool. And the transcript has time code, so you might find a section within the transcript that relates to something you didn't understand, where I might have been explaining something like a lecture from Casey Henry, or attribution, or what the term bounce means. And you could then see what the time code is, and then you could run the video and you could jump to that point in time. So if I mentioned Casey Henry at 10 minutes into the video, and you learn that by reading the transcript, you could then play the video, jump to that 10-minute mark approximately. You might want to go a few seconds before or a few seconds after, and then you would be able to really understand again by watching it. So with that housekeeping underway, I want to describe what this lecture is going to accomplish. Everything that we have up to this point, and you can see on the screen the earlier spreadsheet with just a couple of additions. We've done two segmentation analysis. We've looked at the total sessions, and we've also looked at device segmentation. So in the first case, we looked at multi-session and single session and how that impacted sales, again, about 50-50. And we looked at all the relative percentages. And then we looked at desktop, mobile, and tablet and saw how that impacted sales. What we're going to do in this video is consider how consider three other segments. The segments are going to be gender, source medium, and ultimately age. Again, excuse me. By gender, I think everybody knows we have male, female, and then there's other. And I want to be very open and talk about this. Other can mean a lot of things. Most often, it simply means that this is a person who, for whatever reason, Google has not reported their gender. So not necessarily somebody who believes that they do not have a gender, it just may not have been reported because of how they have configured their systems or what Google knows about them. But this would also include people who consider themselves to have a wide range of gender identities, including someone who may be non-binary, which could mean someone who identifies neither as male or female, or someone who identifies as many other unique gender identities. And so what is important for us here is that as we're doing these segment analysis, that we're looking for people who, or rather we're looking to try to get 100% for each of our segments. So male, female, and other should largely get to 100%. The other thing that we're seeing here, I went out and found the actual total sales for the period, which is $615.91. So if we look in cell L13, we can see that the total sales that we have is below that. It's about $1,000 short. So when we're looking at desktop, mobile, and tablet, there needs to be an additional category in there, which means some of our math is wrong, because we assumed that, or I should say, at least I assumed, that desktop, mobile, and tablet was 100%, but obviously, like gender, there's another and other category in there, and so at some point we may correct that in a future video, but I wanted to point that out. And so when we are looking to calculate total sales or percentages of sales, we're going to use this number, 18,615.91. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on this source medium, because I want to explain what that is. And what we are going to look for is, in other words, where did these people come from? And we know already a lot of it is direct, but we don't know all of it. So if we go back into Google Analytics, we're back in the dashboard, e-commerce. We have visits and product revenue by source medium. And so I'm going to grab this whole thing. Now what's important is this is the top. This is the biggest sections, but this is not 100%. And we'll be able to prove that in a minute. And I grabbed that. I've done a copy, a Control-C. I'm switching to the spreadsheet, and now I want to paste it in here. And if I just hit paste, it all goes into one column, and it looks very ugly. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to Control-Z, which is to reverse that and undo that. What I'm going to do, and I'll zoom in a little bit now, is I'm going to go up to File, Edit, Paste, Paste Special, and do a Paste Values Only. Your spreadsheet should have something like that. I'm using Google Docs, and if you are using Google Docs, that will work for you. So we have the source, and then we have our headings, which, if you didn't remember, we have sessions and revenue. So we're going to just copy the total sales, because we know if this was perfect, it would equal the total revenue. And likewise, we know if all of the sessions are represented here, it will equal 15,889. So that's going to be really easy to check. Again, I'm going to use the formula equals sum, open parenthesis, and then I'm going to click and drag from the first to the last cell. So D21 colon D30. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that, and I'll hit enter. So as we can see, this doesn't include every session. We're missing about 600. And now we can immediately just copy and paste that here. And so we're also missing about $2,000 worth of transactions. So this means that we should go and look and find a better source within Google Analytics that has all of the data. Now, for this video, I'm not going to go into that, and this is just illustrative when we're talking about a dashboard, that this is giving really an overview. And so it's important for me to have done this with you so you understand that what's listed here is not 100%, right? This is $2,000 is missing from here. But this is top line. This is the largest pieces, and you can see that they've sorted by session volume. So there's some sources that have had, very little, there's some sources that have very little session data, meaning less than 101, that equal $2,000 worth of revenue. So those are going to turn out to be really interesting because they're small and yet they contribute a significant amount of revenue. So we will go look for that and find that at some point. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. And now, so we have a column for revenue and we have column for sessions. So sessions works out well here. And we'll make that centered. And we'll make that bold and centered. But revenue doesn't belong here. So I'm just going to highlight this whole thing. And then I'm going to go out. So this is the column where we have sales. So we'll paste that there. And here is the column where we have the number of sales or percentages of sales. And so again, I can copy that heading down to here. And let's see if we can calculate the percentage. So we know that, and I'm going to expand this column a little bit and zoom in just on this part of the sheet. We know that this 16,000 number is wrong, so I'm going to delete it. It doesn't do us any good. And we're going to use the actual total sales number. So let's try a simple formula. We're going to equal this L21, which is the YouTube income, divided by the total sales. And then we'll apply percent to that. So less than 1%, it's 9/100 of 1%. Not sure if this is correct, but it seems good. And we can always try again doing the math a different way. We can go over here and we can, well, let's in here we divided L21, the amount of sales, by the total. We could try doing it the other way, which is to divide the total by the revenue. And you can see if we do, once we apply the percentage to that, we can see that that's a crazy large number. So that can't be right. So if you're unsure, we should be able to know that you can try it another way. You might have made a mistake, but it makes sense. $16 out of $18,000 is obviously going to be a small percentage. Now, I'm going to double click on K21. And again, as I do this, the purple cell, L23, is not going to change. So I'm going to put the dollar signs in. And now I'm just going to paste it in here. And so we now have percentages. And if we added those all up, now we know it's not going to equal 100%. But it equals 89.5%. So again, we know that there's approximately $2,000 missing, but that would be helpful. And later when we add the rest, we'll know ultimately that we have 100%. So I'm scrolling to the left here. I'll zoom out. All right, so this may be a little bit hard to read on your screen, but I've left everything in the appropriate column, but we can see that column or row 23, which is direct, is 41% of sales. So 41% of our revenue came from someone who directly entered our store address into their web browser. Mail from Google as a referral accounted for another 33% of sales. So we put those two together, that's approximately 74%. So the vast majority of sales either comes from direct or from email. And then we have a few other things. We have partners that did nothing. We have a Google pay-per-click. That's what CPC stands for. That accounted for 2%. And there was another kind of ad in here. We see CPM, cost per thousand. That accounted for less than 1%. And that's it. The rest of these are zero. Now, again, YouTube is 0.09%. We can understand, again, first, there's $2,000 missing, so there are a few other channels that are not listed here. But it's also worth remembering, again, if we look in the upper left, and I'll zoom in now, that this is only the data from August 1st to August 7th. So if we looked at a different time period, we might see that these numbers have changed. And what we would want to do if we were really trying to figure this out, maybe there'll be a test on this, but if we took data from a whole year and did these same sorts of calculations, we might have a better view. Or if we looked at a holiday period, say the last 3 months of the year, October, November, and December, might give us an idea about holiday shopping. It may be that some of these work better at particular times of the year, and others work differently in another period. So in the spring, around Valentine's Day, one of these channels might work better than it would work during Christmas or holiday shopping season. Okay, so that's this very useful segmentation to see from our sources. Again, this is the source and the medium, YouTube referral, email referral, partners who are affiliates. We have those percentages. So, as I said, we're working on 3 segments here. So source medium is 1. We're going to do age eventually, and then gender. So now we have to go and find where that gender is. I'm going to pause the video for a moment. All right, I'm back here in the video. We're going to go into Google, and we're in the audience overview section. You can see on the left, and we need to create our gender segment. So I have a segment here for female. I have a segment for gender unknown. And then you can see here there's a little search because it is kind of long. If I type male, and then I can find female. So again, we're only allowed to do 4 of these. So if you had, like when we get to age, we may find that we have to run this a few times, or we could create a report that would give this to us. But again, we're pretty good here that, again, we'll test this, but everybody, this should equal 100% of the traffic. Again, in the lower left corner, I'm going to click apply. And so again, here's all of our users. This is a number that we've seen many times. And then we have female, gender unknown, and male. This is, maybe surprising. If you had only run male and female, you're leaving off a lot of the visits, a lot of the population. And so let's start to plug some of these numbers in. So we're going to grab the female number, and you're just going to watch me. I'm going to go back and forth, and I'm going to paste in these numbers. And so these are, again, the first column is always sessions. And so we're doing sessions by gender. And then now the order here is female, male, and other. And here we have female, gender unknown, and male. And so there are ways of going through here and changing the order and moving things around a little bit. But we'll just try to remember what we're doing. So now these are the unique users. And so you're just going to watch me plug all of this data in. There's our mail. And now we need page views. And, this shouldn't be surprising. Again, this top line has been the same in all these reports. So the total number of pages hasn't changed. And this is old data. This is from August, obviously 2016. So this is not live data. If you were doing this in the middle of a day, well, by the end of the day, it would have changed, of course. So again, we have female. We'll do male, and then unknown. So again, this is a particularly important thing here, I believe, that we are understanding that we want to get to 100% of data, and so we need to think outside the box a little bit, because again, if we were thinking in a very binary manner, we might have left off a bunch of folks. So now, in theory, we can just copy some of these down. So I can copy this to here. So I did this before and it didn't work. Let's try copying 2 cells. Okay, and that worked. And so now I can do this a lot of ways, but I'm going to do equals sum, open parentheses, and I'm going to drag through the 3 of these, and parenthesis. And again, I have 100%, so that's good. I'm going to copy these 3 here, paste it in. I'll copy this, and that should be 100%. It's not. It's a little bit over, which means there's some rounding error here, but that's okay. That's really close enough. And in terms of totals, we should be able to copy that data. That worked. So we can see that the total number of sessions is correct. When we look at the individual sections, we're missing, we have a few more here than we have there. So, this is one of those things as we look at attribution, why we start to, as Casey Henry reminded us, it's a very hard thing to do. And people spend a lot of money. We talked with even Sam about, and Casey, about having one point of truth, one point of measurement. And so here, we have the same number of sessions, but when we look at the unique users, we're off by, about 70 individuals. And that's probably in part why this is, off a little bit here, the percentage of visits. But then when we look back at page views, we're good here. So again, there's some rounding errors and things going on in here, and there are ways of making the data more precise, but we will leave that off for now. So now we can look at page views by percent. We'll paste that in. Again, we have 100%. And we want to see, we don't know at this point how much these people bought. But again, we can see that men are accounting for 50% of the traffic. Women are accounting for 1/5, or about 20% of the traffic. And then this unidentified group is 30%. And again, we cannot assume anything about this. This is most likely people who have different privacy settings using different technology where Google has not been able to determine their gender. So we can assume that this is a group that, you know, is made up of males and females, and then other individuals who do not have a binary gender identity. And you can look that up and read through that and understand it on your own. But let's see now, we want to try to get some of the sales data, and let's go take a look at how we might do that. We recall that there is, under goals, some of the e-commerce data. So we'll click on Conversions, Goals, Overview. And it's remembered those same segments, right? We have all users, female, gender unknown, and male. And in this case, again, I just swapped that so they're in the same order that we're doing them. Again, each one has its own color to help you as you're going through this. And so if you remember from the earlier video, we want to look at purchases completed. Now, we don't have a dollar value here, but we know that, again, there's 200 total purchases. We'll see if this adds up, but so we have 61. Again, we're just going to copy that over. We have 98 from men. It makes sense. We know the men purchased half, and we know there's 200, so that's about half. That's making logical sense. And then we have 41 from gender unknown, and we can copy H18 over to J18, and that equals 200. So we're good. We can highlight this whole range. We can use the center command here and just make that look better. Eventually we'll change the font size. So we know that women purchased 61 items, or 20%, and they accounted for 20% of the page views. We don't yet know what the sales are, and we'll need to ultimately try to find that number and plug that in. And hopefully, as we're looking at this data, you're starting to have some questions. Like, we know that the desktop users are more likely to purchase, and men are more likely to purchase, and multi-session viewers are more likely to purchase. So maybe you have a question: what is the dollar value plus the purchase numbers from multi-session male desktop users? And then where did they come from? Did they come from direct or YouTube or one of these other sources? We can guess. We know that 70% of them came from two sources. So chances are that's where everybody came. Now, by the way, there's this other source here, 11%, which is Google, which is search engine. But as we're doing this, I hope you can see that as we're going through, there's always more questions. And again, let's talk back to the Casey Benjamin lecture, a Casey Henry lecture, where he talks about using a tool called Mixpanel. And one of the advantages of Mixpanel is you can set up all of these reports, and it takes a very long time, but once these reports are set up, all of the data will update automatically, and so you can just go and set the time period, and you'll have all these different kinds of things calculated. It is possible to do that within Google Analytics. It's just takes a little bit of time, and it may not be as perfect as what Mixpanel would do. But that's ultimately our goal, and again, we can set up some reports and things. But what I'm looking to do here, since this is an introduction course to e-commerce, is to try to get you understanding, try to help you understand um, segmentation and how segmentation is affecting our key metrics: page views, visits, purchases, the number of purchases, and ultimately the dollar value. Let's go back to Google Analytics here and see if there's anything that we can do here. So under goal completions, where it says all goals, we know that we really only want this first goal. And so if there is a way to set that to just that, we should do that. And so I believe by clicking on Purchase Completed Goals, we're going to just get that goal. And so when we look down here, and this is for source and medium, we can start to get these kinds of breakdowns. Now this is completion location. What we want is source and medium, so we're going to click on that. And now we can start to get some interesting data. Now it happens to be by male and female and gender unknown, but we could change that to any of the other segments that we have here. So completed goal 1 completions. And what we really want is goal 1 is purchase completed. Which is what we have here. And again, we don't have dollar values here. But this is all very helpful as we're trying to understand what's going on. Now we have other bits of data here. We have abandonment rates. And that's something that we will also talk about in another video. We have conversion rates, which is the rate that people will become a customer. We can see that, and as we look at this, that we know that men buy more because there's more of them. But they abandon more frequently. Women, on the other hand, convert better. 21% of them convert versus 16% for men. So when we looked back here and we saw that men are accounting for 98 sales, it's worth understanding that there's a lot less women. Just like when we were looking earlier at the multi-session, there's a lot less multi-session folks, yet they're 50% of sales. There's a lot less women, but they're accounting for, per individual woman, a greater number of sales. So let's go ahead and pull some of this data in. And we can see that, again, while women are accounting for 30% of the sales, that's from a lot less women. And we can go and even calculate, the sale per woman, but that's largely what Google is giving us here, that 21% of women are converting. And this is the actual number of men. When we go back here, this is the total number of unique men, but this is not the number of men who have actually purchased. So we can add another whole column here if we wanted to calculate, again, what Google is already giving us, which is this conversion rate. So ultimately, what we now know is that women who buy convert more often. They abandon less frequently. It's a 3% difference, but that's still significance. The unknown gender folks convert less and abandon more frequently. So finally, I want to look at age. So we're going to go back for the moment to this audience overview. And we're going to set up, we're going to have to remove some of these. Takes a second because it has to recalculate. We're going to remove male, female, and gender unknown. And let's see if we have segments already set up for age. So I have age by mobile, including tablet. I have age by duration. I have age by desktop versus iOS versus Android. But here's just age. So I have age 35 to 54. So I know that then an earlier segment would be 34. So if I type in 34, I don't have, I may not have set up that segment before. Oh, no, here we go. So we have, we have ages 18 to 24, 25 to 30 to 44, and 45 to 64. Now it's not letting me click on this one because we already have that other age group, so we'll turn that off. That was a special segment I had used. And so we'll use again these three. Now you can go in and set these up to be broader or more narrower. If you have a very big difference, if you deal with a lot of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 22-year-olds, you may not want to lump them together. You may want to break them all out. And here, when we're going 45 to 64, that's really a big range. And so we may, in fact, want to break that out into another smaller group. But this works out well for us because, again, we are allowed three segments. Again, I'll click the apply button. And here we are looking at hopefully a very familiar screen at this point, where we have all the sessions and then we have them by age. And again, we're just immediately looking at page views. So again, you're going to see me, I'll do my copy and paste here. So here's age. And let's label this. So we have 18 to 24, and I remember that this was 45 to 64, so this must be 25 to 44. And again, we're looking at sessions. So we know when we start to add this up that we're going to be missing a whole bunch because this cannot be, this is unlikely to be 100%. We have people who are under 18. We have people that are older than 64. And like when we were speaking about gender, we had unknown gender. We're also going to have people who are unknown age. And so that's perhaps for another video. But let's grab the data that we do have. So we'll continue building out our sheet here. These are actual session, individual session data. And sorry, my screen moved around there a little bit, but that happens. But we can at least see, as we're starting to look at this data, that most of our shoppers, most of our visitors are in that middle age group. But now we can, as we're starting to pull over the pages, let's take a look and see how this relates. And so again, I'm just making sure that I'm lining this up. Here's page views. And so those are the page views for the first group. Now, when we're talking about demographics especially, there's a term I'd like to define, which is called cohort. Cohort is a group that we've put together. And so we can use that term very technically, loosely. There's different ways of using any term. But definitely when we're talking about demographics and we're talking about lumping or putting a group of people into a category, we can definitely call it a cohort. So we have, in this case, 3 cohorts. And now all this data is here. So again, I'm going to do a copy and a paste. Let's see if this is going to work. So remember that D, $sign D and $4 is there. And is that still appropriate? Yes, because that's the total number of sessions. So these are still $sign D, $4, so we know that this is correct. And I can add that all up. I'll grab that, paste it in. So that isn't working. Let's do it by ourselves. Sum, open parentheses, drag through. So we have E34 through E36, close parentheses. So that's only 60% of our users. So we know that some things are missing, but let's see how we're going along here. We'll go to our next column. We'll copy. And again, we'll move that over. And so again, about 60%, which is good because that's consistent. But let's see what happens when we get to page views. Okay, here we go. And so it's not as big as I was hoping for, but we can see that this cohort, the 3 cohorts that we have, do account for 63% of the traffic when they're only 60% of the sessions, or 60% of the visits, or the visitors, I should say. And so we can continue this. If we go back to Google, we go back to conversions, overview. We can look at the purchases completed. And so again, we have our 200 here. And so we have now 45, 96, and 14. So 45, 96, and 14. Did I get that correct? Let's go take a look. 45, 96, and 14. Great. So we can copy this. And again, we don't know the dollar value right now, but here we go. And we can add that up. Equals sum, open parentheses, drag through, close parentheses, return. So we have 155 out of 200 purchases. So again, we know this isn't 100%, but we can see that the group that is 25 to 44 is accounting for 48% of the sales. So when we're targeting, look at this, the 45 to 64-year-olds are only accounting for 7% of the sales. So unless these are super large sales, maybe these are older people and they're buying yachts. The yachts are millions of dollars. Well, we wouldn't care if we sold 14 yachts that were each costing 10 million each. That would be fine. But we can see, again, as we're trying to narrow down and understand our targeting, the desktop users buy more, the multi-session users buy more, men and women buy similarly, but women convert better, and that the age group that buys the most is age 25 to 4. And so now we could go in and do further analysis. Maybe the real group that we want is age 22 to 30. And so if we did this analysis, differently, it might turn out different. So that will be the last step of this particular video. You can see that we're leaving a lot of this spreadsheet unfulfilled at this point, but we're trying to, and again, this is a bit of an overview for you. I'll zoom out. That we are trying to understand segments, how different parts of our visitor base, when viewed through different, I'll use the term lens, like a lens in your glass or the lens in a telescope. When viewed through different segments, so when we look at sessions, we find that it's the multi-user sessions that work well. When we look at devices, it's the desktop. When we look at females, males, and others, we find it's the women who convert better. Although men are still buying more, but that's because we have 50% of them are men, and only less than 20% of our visitors are female. But the ones that we are getting are converting better. And then we can see that people who come from Google Direct or from email referrals are our best purchases. So we could speculate here that a woman who's using a desktop, who's a multi-session viewer, and who is coming direct or from an email referral is going to be perhaps our best customer, the one who's going to buy fast and not abandon the shopping cart. And we'll talk about that some more. Now, we'd have to test that. It may not be true. And again, we're only looking at 1 week's worth of data. We could expand this to look at a year's worth of data or several years' worth of data, or again, look at a particular part of the year like Christmas or Valentine's Day or July 4th, because what may be true for Christmas, again, may not be true for the whole year. So we're seeing that younger people in general are buying more, right? 48% of the sales is coming from the cohort 25 to 44, and 22% from the younger cohort. But let's try to set some different age groups and see what happens. This will be the last part of this video. So I'm going to go back to the audience overview, just so we're back at a familiar screen. And again, I'm going to remove these, and I'm still leaving the other there because that helps us, anchors us in understanding that we're getting or working with 100%. Now I'm going to add a segment, and I'm going to have to create a new segment. And so this may be a little bit confusing. I'm going to do it 3 times, and I will try to detail what I am doing, but you may need to go to YouTube and watch a video on how to do this. But again, I'm going to click on New Segment, Demographics, and so I'd like to break this out differently. So I have 18 to 24. You can see before we did 25 to 44 was one segment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one segment here called age 18 to 24. And I wish that I could break this out even finer. And we can already see, based on the data that we have, it is giving us some of the data here on the right. So it's telling us the number of sessions and so forth. And we can add gender, We can add other kinds of things here, but we'll skip all that. So we're just going to do age 18 to 24. I'll save that. Then I'm going to hit the plus sign here, new segment. Hit the wrong button there, new segment. I'm going to do 25 to 34. And again, I'm going to call it age 25 to 34. And I'll save that. And I'm going to do new segment. And this one I'm going to do age 35 to 44. And I'll save that. Oh, I didn't click. Here we go. And again, it's updating on the left. That's telling us some data even before we hit, and that's based on the data that we're looking at, the underlying data set. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove, in this case, the all user, because I want to get one more group in here, and again, we're limited to 4. So hit the plus sign, hit new segment, and we're going to add now, so we did 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll add 45 to 54. Okay. And again, there may be ways of going in and customizing this even more to get, again, a slightly different range. So again, now we're missing the total, but we know what that total is. We've seen it many times. But so now I have a new 4 segments that I can bring over. So let's go to the spreadsheet and prepare for that. So this is age number 2. Okay. And we're going to have 18 to 24. We're going to have 25 to 34. We're going to have 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. Let's see if 45 to 54. I will zoom this in a little bit so you can see. Let's see if we got that correct. 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54. Okay, great. So now we just have to start copying over the data. Now some of that, well, that's the same. We've already done 18 to 24. So in fact, we can just go ahead and grab that whole line. And if we did this right, that should all be the same, and it is. But all the other ones are different, so we're going to have to copy and paste them. So now we'll do our 25 to 34. And I'm going to do them by column because it's easier for me. And again, there are ways of doing all of this in Google and setting it up as a report, as a custom screen. And if you were doing this on a regular basis, setting it up inside of Google Analytics would be perhaps the preferred way to do it. Why are we doing this in a spreadsheet? I think it's helpful to actually understand the math, the formulas behind what we're doing. So that's one reason I'm doing this in the spreadsheet. And another, again, is that Google Analytics, how to use it, is part of understanding e-commerce, but this is not a Google Analytics course. And so I'm focused on the e-commerce aspect of understanding attribution and understanding targeting and so forth, understanding that we set up our shop, obviously we want to welcome all users, but all users are not purchasing equally. And so as we start to create content, whether our content is an ad or a video or a blog post, as we start to do this, we need to understand that we're going to get different results from different segments. All right, so now I'm going to paste this in, and we'll have to total this. Equals sum, open parentheses, drag through the column, E42 colon E45, close parentheses, return. And so again, we're still only at 58%, so it's a little bit less than the top column. Why is that? Does that make sense? Oh, because the top column runs from age 18 to age 64, and this column only runs from age 18 to 54. So we've lost 9 years of people, from people who are from 55 to 64, but we've only dropped less than 2% of the total. So this implies that they were always a very small amount. And we can actually do the math, because if we subtract E36, if we take D36 and subtract D45, we can see that it's approximately 300. So we lost a whole bunch of people, age range, but we only lost 300 people. All right, so let's continue this here. Again, now we're looking at sessions, unique actual individuals, and again we're at 50%. And now we're going to look at page views, and we're at, again, 62%. So again, even though we've lost 300 people, we've only dropped a small percentage. Now, what is it? We can actually calculate it. So we're going to go equals J 37 minus J, I'm sorry, I said J, but I meant I 37 minus I 46. So we lost 302 people. How do I know that? Again, we can do it right here. We can subtract D36, take D36 and subtract D45, 302 people. 302 people who are aged 50, and we know this, I can put it in here, they are aged 55 to 64. So we've just, recreated this group, even though we didn't extract it directly. We're just using our basic mathematical skills here. But these 302 people only account for 1.52% of the page views. And so as we now go a little bit further, now we know we need to look at sales. And what I want to do is just bring down some of these columns so that this is not being that confusing to you. So let's see if that works. Okay. This is sessions, right? And so again, we need to get the sales numbers. We don't have the dollar amounts, but again, we're in audience. We know we can go to the conversion goals overview, and we want purchase completed, goal 1 completions. And again, we know that there's 200 of these, but we have 45, 65, 31, and 20 and 12. So we've already entered this, so 65, 31, and 12. 65, 31, and 12. Did I get that correctly? 65, 31, and 12. Yep, and again, it's 45, and we already have that 45 there. So now we can do this copy, and we can see the difference now, and this is why we are doing this. When we're looking here, we knew that the group that is aged 25 to 44 accounts for 48%. But we were wondering how much of those are the younger people and how much are the older people. And when we now go down here, we can see, oh, yeah, as they get older, they're buying less. And in particular, we can see the group that's 25 to 34 is accounting for 32%. So what used to be 58%, which used to be rather 48%, we can see that the bulk of that is coming from this group that's 25 to 34. And we can see that, the younger group, 18 to 24, is better than the next group older. In other words, if you could only target two groups, targeting 18 through 34 would give you 55% of the sales, versus if you targeted sorry about that, we're running a little screen problem, but we're almost done with the video. You can see that the next age group is better. So I'm going to end the video here. This is Professor Shapiro, known as Harry Hawk on the internet, and we will pick up later. Thank you.